Today we are going to take a look at the three different versions of fascism in Europe during the mid-20th century. What is fascism? Fascism is an authoritarian and nationalist political ideology that emerged in the early 20th century. It is characterized by dictatorial power, strong centralized government control, suppression of dissent, and the glorification of the nation or a particular ethnic group. When you think of fascism, you probably think of Nazism and the Third Reich. However, Italy and Croatia were also both fascist regimes at the time, and they were very different from Nazi Germany. Since Mussolini is seen as the founder of fascism, we'll start with Italy first. Italian fascism emerged under Benito Mussolini and his National Fascist Party in Italy during the early 20th century. Italian fascism emphasized nationalism, authoritarian rule, corporatism, and the rejection of liberal democracy. Mussolini loosened gun laws and allowed private businesses to operate, obviously working closely with the government. It sought to create a centralized state with a strong leader at its helm. Italian fascism aimed to revive Italy's prestige, promote national unity, and pursue imperialistic ambitions. Italian nationalists wanted to create a new Italy that echoed ancient Rome. They weren't obsessed with European or world domination as the Nazis were. Rather, Italian nationalists saw Italy expanding her borders only throughout the Mediterranean. It implemented policies that suppressed political opposition and established a totalitarian regime. But it did not have the same level of anti-Semitism and racial ideology as German Nazism. The Italians weren't fans of Germany's anti-Semitic ways. In fact, most Italians started hating fascism when Mussolini got closer to Hitler and started passing racial laws. The Italians didn't feel like any particular minority group, which in Italy's case were Jews and Africans, was a problem to Italy or Italians, as they were assimilated to Italian culture and were functioning members of the Italian economy. Obviously, this is very different to the thought of thinking up north in Germany. The Italians felt that their leader, who they supported, was selling them out to Hitler when Mussolini passed the Italian racial laws, which tried to segregate Italian Jews and African inhabitants of the Italian colonial empire. However, these laws were not really enforced throughout Italy, despite pressure from Nazi Germany. Italians were not obsessed with race as the Germans were, and were skeptical on Hitler's obsession with Nordicism. That does not go to say that the Italians weren't racist. They were, and most fascist leaders throughout the Italian government held racial prejudices. They just did not think passing and acting upon extreme laws like Germany was necessary. Croatian fascism. Oh boy, where do I even start? Croatia, much like the rest of the Balkans, was a mess during World War II. Well, actually, I can't remember a time the Balkans wasn't a messy place. Croatian fascism refers to the Ustasha movement, which was active in the independent state of Croatia NDH, 1941 to 1945, during World War II. The Ustasha movement, led by Ante Pavelić, aimed to establish an independent Croatian state aligned with Axis powers. The Ustasha regime implemented brutal policies, including the persecution and genocide of Serbs, Jews, Roma, and other groups considered enemies of the Croatian state. It promoted an extreme form of Croatian nationalism tied to a Catholic identity and sought to create an ethnically homogeneous Croatia. Pavelić bounced between Germany and Italy during the war. Prior to the war, during his rise to power, he relied heavily on Italian support. He hated the Kingdom of Yugoslavia and wanted a free Croatian state. In 1941, an independent Croatian state was declared on the air via Zagreb radio station. However, the recognition of this supposed independent Croatian state was still to be recognized internationally, or at the very least by the Axis powers. The Ustasha received very limited support from ordinary Croats, and German forces estimated that only 2% of the country's population actually supported the Ustasha regime. The Axis powers finally recognized the NDH after Pavelić gave up 5,400 square kilometers of Croatian territory. After this, Pavelić tried to get closer to Germany to try to get some Croatian land back from the Italians. However, Germany feared rupturing their relations with Italy and decided to support Italy in whatever land disputes the Croats and Italians had. This resulted in the Treaty of Rome, where Croatia gave up part of Dalmatia, Kirk, Rab, Korčula, Beograd, Šibenik, Trogir, Split, Čiovo, Veliki I Mali Drvenik, Šolta, Miljet, and parts of Konaval and the Bay of Kotor to Italy. This was not received well by the Croat populace, and they staged a protest on Christmas Day 1941. Pavelić signed many laws, one of which had a goal of preserving Croatian heritage. The law decree on protection of the nation and the state was passed and allowed the regime to get rid of unwanted employees such as Serbs, Jews and Romani. He soon banned the Cyrillic alphabet, leaving Orthodox Christians in Croatia neglected. He also signed a law into effect that made Jews non-citizens and forced them to wear identification tags. This spiraled to blaming Jews for every activity or critique of the NDH and ordered their internment in concentration camps. The Ustascha were killing machines. This led to Nazi Germany's intervention multiple times. Hitler had to send his commanders there to try to stop Pavelić and his lust for blood. Hitler even sent Heinrich Himmler to Croatia to slow Pavelić in his killing sprees. By the end of 1941, most Croats were highly disappointed with the Ustascha regime and whispers of rejoining Yugoslavia and adopting communism started to be heard. Hitler sent commanders and troops to Croatia to be witnesses and try to calm the killings. By mid-1942, Pavelić only controlled Zagreb. Many German commanders urged Hitler to have Pavelić removed, as they did not want this blood to look like it was on German hands. After all the blood shed in fascist Croatia, Pavelić ordered his troops to march toward Austria and refused to surrender to the Yugoslav army. He gave them permission to surrender to the British army instead. Pavelić, however, left the country 2 days prior. His army was turned back and was killed by the Yugoslav army. Pavelić was seen as a coward and eventually made his way to Argentina. German fascism, commonly referred to as Nazism, was the ideology and political movement led by Adolf Hitler and his National Socialist German Workers' Party (NSDAP) in Germany from the early 1920s to 1945. This is commonly what most people think about when they hear about fascism. Nazism was characterized by extreme nationalism, racial superiority, authoritarianism, and anti-Semitism. It aimed to establish a totalitarian state, suppress opposition, and pursue territorial expansion. The Nazi regime implemented policies that led to the persecution and genocide of millions, including Jews, Romani people, disabled individuals, and others during the Holocaust. A few key characteristics of Nazism include racial supremacy. Nazism promoted the idea of Aryan racial superiority, claiming that the Aryan race was superior to other races. It propagated a racist ideology that targeted Jews, Romani people, disabled individuals, and others deemed racially inferior. Anti-Semitism was a central tenet of Nazism. The Nazi regime implemented policies aimed at persecuting, marginalizing, and ultimately exterminating Jews. Nazism glorified military strength and pursued a policy of territorial expansion. The regime sought to establish a greater German empire through aggressive conquests, leading to the outbreak of World War II. I don't want to bore you guys too much on German fascism, as that is talked about and portrayed the most in movies and history classes. If you'd like a longer video strictly on one of these examples of fascism, or any other political ideology, let me know in the comments and I would be more than happy to make a video in more detail. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, it means a lot to the channel.